Hello, everybody. Namaskaram. My name is Subramaniam Vivaturi, and today I'm going to be talking about Maya. What is the principle of Maya? What's its relationship with the creation? What's its relationship with God? When did it come? How does it disappear? And its role. I'm going to talk a few of those things. Just give me a second. I'm going to load up the PowerPoint that I have. Right. So everything that I'm going to be talking about is essentially from my study on Meher Baba's literature and from the knowledge that I've got from my Sadguru Sri Meher Chaitanya Ji Maharaj over many years of, or decades really, of my association with him. The picture you see on the right is Meher Baba. I'm not going to talk too much about who Meher Baba is because there are ample and more resources available on the internet. You can find, you can Google, and all the rest of it. There is a small video clip I'm going to play for a second. Probably a minute of a video clip, just to give a perspective of why I'm playing that. This is the clip that Meher Baba, in his first trip to London in 1932, spoke to Charles Fordham.
Together, all religions and cults, like beads on one string, and revitalize them for individual and collective needs. This is my mission to the West.
So Meher Baba says, he said, just now you heard, is that his mission to the West is to revitalize all religions and bring them as beads on a string. So what I'm going to be speaking need not be seen in any context of one particular religion, but a more broader aspect of that. That's the reason of my playing this clip. And very quickly, the reason you see Meher Baba using the board is because in 1925, on July 10th, Meher Baba has announced that he was not going to be speaking and going into silence, which he done for 44 years till 1969, till he dropped his body. However, he's traveled the world. He's traveled India extensively, the breadth north and south, east and west extensively, written a number of books, and so on. But let's get to the main topic of what we wanted to talk today is about Maya, really. So when we want to talk about Maya, the context of Maya may not be fully understood if we don't bring in the context of God. So let's just talk a little bit about God and then talk about what Maya is. Well, some people say Maya can be more difficult to understand than explanation of God. Possibly true, but I'm going to try and tell a little bit of basic my own understanding of Maya is, and perhaps you might be able to get a good understanding on that. Okay, but before that, first of all, who is God? I guess all our religions largely do tell us about God, and in many, many cases, the understanding really is that God alone is real. He is infinite. He is omnipotent. He is all-pervading, eternal, infinite existence, eternal, infinite being. So this we kind of know. We heard of it and we know about it. And the apparent existence of duality that we see, that you and I see, the duality is really the finite world around that we see here is said to be illusory. The existence of finite is only apparent and it is false, this entire creation that we see ahead of us. Anything which is not God, because God, you're saying, is the only thing that is real, everything else beyond that is finite and unreal. But having said that, God cannot be really explained. He cannot be understood. He cannot be theorized. He cannot be argued. He cannot be discussed. They're all good. They're all nice. They're all important for us to really to get our understanding, to perhaps question and to discuss, to read. All that are important. I'm not saying no to that. But at the end of the day, really God has to be lived. Meher Baba said in God Speaks. A very interesting point about the living of God. What do you mean by God living? You have to live. but we'll come to that later at some other time. So if all this, if God alone is real and he is infinite, so what is this creation that you and I are seeing everywhere? The world that we see, we perceive, we touch, we feel, we are a part of, we contribute to. What is all this? And then it said that it is the creation of Maya. It is created by Maya, which is the principle of ignorance. Now, Maya has a resonance in most of the Eastern religions, I think, on the Eastern thought. There is fairly detailed discussions around Maya and its principles and its on it. Maybe the Abrahamic faiths and Abrahamic religions don't talk much about Maya. I think they allude to it, maybe, but I'm no expert in that space. But I certainly the Eastern thought has quite a bit of discussions around Maya. So what is it? It is. So what is Maya? Meher Baba here gives some very interesting pointers for us to understand what is Maya. It is not illusion. It is the creator of illusion. Maya is not false. It is that gives false impressions. Maya is not unreal. It is that makes the real appear as unreal and the unreal appear as real. What is real here and what is unreal here from a spiritual point of view? The real is the reality. That's the reality of God. And Maya is covering that reality and making that real appear as unreal because you and I don't know that. And the unreal, which is the creation, you and I experience it, you and I feel it, we're a part of that. It is making that unreality, for want of a better word, it is making that appear as real, and that is what Maya is doing. Maya is not duality, it's that's causing duality. So if that is the definition and that is the understanding of Maya, let's try and understand how big and what is its magnitude. Everything which is finite, everything that is limited belongs to the world of illusion. The spirituality, that's the spiritual belief and understanding that everything that is non-God is really the world of illusion. But here is a very important and interesting point. The principle that is causing that illusion, not the illusion itself, but the principle that is causing the illusion, in a sense, has to be regarded as not being an illusion. Take an example of, let's say, a magician. David Copperfield comes to my mind, but perhaps any magician may be okay for that. He or she, the magician is doing some magic, let's say, cutting a human being into two parts. They put the box and the rest of it, and the guy cuts the person sleeping in that. Now, definitely he's cutting nobody. He won't be very popular if he does that. The work that the magician is doing, the process of the magic, the illusion that he's doing, that is illusion. But the magician as himself, he exists with the physical body. And the outcome of what he is doing is the Maya. So that is what here is the explanation of the principle of the Maya itself need not be considered as part of illusion. But everything else that the Maya produces, which we have just seen in the previous slide, all that reality, that creation and everything is part of the illusion. So this whole universe that we see, the star, the sun, the billions of stars that are there, the ever-expanding universe is not infinite. It may be very hard to count, but very, very difficult to count, but it's still not infinite. But science may or may not agree to that, but that is not infinite. So Maya is not limited by space. Maya is not limited by time. In fact, space is in Maya. Maya is not in space. Space is a creation of Maya. Similarly, time is in Maya. Maya is not in time. Maya cannot have a beginning in time, an end in time. This is it with Maya. It is time and space. Both the space-time constructs are all within the constructs of Maya. Time comes into existence because of Maya, and again disappears when Maya disappears. So with that understanding of what Maya is and some of the things that it does, let's try and understand. It is a little difficult to wrap our head around it in some instances about what exactly is this Maya, what is the scope of this Maya. There could be some intellectual difficulties in understanding it. So let me try and break it up into three parts based on that book on Discourses again. So is Maya finite? Think about it for a second. Is Maya finite? And then he says, no. If Maya is finite, then it is unreal. And anything that is finite and unreal won't have the capability of creating this entire universe and this entire infiniteness that you and I see. This whole universe. So if Maya by itself is finite and unreal, it won't have that capability. So Maya has to be regarded as real and infinite. Okay. So is Maya infinite? Let's just observe that. If Maya is infinite, then we just said that in a few slides back that only God alone is real and he is infinite. So you can't have two infinites. So Maya in that sense is not infinite. So it is unreal and finite, goes back to the left-hand side of it. So where are we with this Maya? It's once we're saying it is not finite, once we're saying it is not infinite. So where are we? Now, here is saying then what is it? So for our understanding, for the intellectual understanding of man, it is useful for us to think of Maya and perhaps acceptable to many as well, to think of Maya as infinite. Okay. Well, we just said that it was not, but it's saying, think of it for our own understanding, think of it as an infinite aspect. But ultimately, eventually, Maya cannot be ultimately true for the simple reason that you cannot have two infinities. But for the understanding of it, it may be okay for us to think of it as an infinite, which is creating this whole creation and everything that you and I perceive and see. Going back, let's see who is God and Maya. God is unfathomable. God is understandable. We talked about that somewhere in the beginning. God cannot be theorized. He cannot be researched. He has to be lived. He has to be understood. He has to be experienced. The experience of Aham Brahmasmi, I am God. And that is the experience that one has to go to. So God cannot be, he's not to be understood. He cannot be understood or unfathomable. But then just as God is, so is Maya. Maya is unfathomable. Maya is ununderstandable. So the best way for us to think about it as Maya is God's shadow. Just as there is, wherever there is a man, there is a shadow. Where there is God, there is this inscrutable Maya. So both God and Maya are inscrutable from limited intellectual working point of view. But when they can be really thoroughly understood, when one reaches the final knowledge of realization. What is the final knowledge of realization? The final knowledge of realization is the realization of the self. And what is that realization? That realization is, I am God, Aham Brahmasmi. I alone exist, God alone exists, and I am that God. And that is that final realization. And it is at that time, that is the time when the understanding comes onto you, dawns onto you through experience, not through some reading of that book, of the role of Maya and the role of God, and only God exists in our experience. So if this is Maya from how is it created and what happens, where did Maya get created? If you look at the evolution, the entire evolution, there is the state of Paratpara Parabrahmasthiti before creation began. Call it Big Bang, pre-Big Bang, if you like, pre-Big Bang, that state where it is the unconscious state of God. And then you have the Paramatma state of God, where God has realized himself as God. And then there's the God as creation. At some point later in one of the future videos, I will talk about what do I mean as why am I calling this a God's journey, and not your journey or my journey. In both the cases of where the unconscious state of God, which is the Parabrahma state, and the Paramatma state, Maya is not there. Primarily because in the first state of the pre-Big Bang, there is no creation. If there's no creation, there's no Maya, or you could say there's no Maya, there's no creation. And in the second state, where God has realized himself as God, there is no creation. So Maya is only in the state of creation, only in the experience of creation. Maya begins with creation and ends with creation. And it exists in the world of duality, where one is conscious of the gross body, living in the gross world, experiencing the gross samskaras with his gross consciousness, or with his subtle body, experiencing it through the subtle consciousness, or the mental body, experiencing it through the mental consciousness, the mental samskaras. So any of the three bodies, the gross, subtle, and mental bodies, as long as one is associated with those bodies, and as those bodies exist, Maya exists. But at the end of the day, it is still an illusion, and it has no existence. This is a very interesting point. So Maya being God's shadow, where is its existence? Its existence is, it has no existence except in non-existence. The shadow exists. If you stand in the sun, the shadow exists. But does it, the shadow is there, but does it exist? Does it have an existence on its own? No. So similarly, so is Maya. And eventually, that shadow has to give way to God. When the sun of truth, when the sun rays are feeble, the Maya is large. The shadow of Maya is large. And when the sun is at the zenith on the top of your head, the Maya disappears. So here Meher Baba says, keep your face towards the sun. And even if there is the Maya, it's still there, but it is behind you. It troubles you less. Its potency is less because your face is turned towards God and you're in that path. But the moment you turn your face away from God and towards the Maya, you are following it. It is following you, and the journey continues. Lastly, on all the topics that I'm going to talk about today and in the future, I'm also going to try and give a small perspective of what science is thinking about in the same space. Now I'm no physicist, but have a deep interest in the intersection of spirituality and science. So I'm going to try and, based on my understanding, I'm going to talk a little bit about what science is thinking about the space. And whenever you want to talk about this, the question, the thing of quantum mechanics comes in, and many of us may have heard about that. And one of the things with quantum mechanics is it says observing an object causes it to lose its quantum nature and collapse into the classical form that you and I are seeing. That means when we observe an object, the object before we observed, the object before we saw, is in some other form. And then at our observation, it collapses. It comes into the form that you and I are seeing. Intriguing, mind-boggling to say the least. But mind you, this is science saying it. It is not some religious person talking out of a religious book. This is science. Great guys like Einstein, Irwin, Schrödinger, I can never get his name, excuse me. But these are the kind of people who are talking about it. And these are the guys who are saying about it, that an object, before you see the object, before the object is seen, and once it's seen, it loses its quantum nature. And that is what science and quantum mechanics calls it as the collapse of the wave function. And so on our observation, we collapse the wave function. And not only as an observer, we collapse the wave function, but we also create the reality that we see. Again, science saying it. This is again science saying it. So all of us are actually collapsing the wave. That it means we're all collapsing the wave. And when we collapse the wave, what happens? The wave settles in its particle form. Before the observation, The wave was not in the particle form, it was in the wave form, according to science. There are a lot of resources available for you to, if you wish to understand more, the double slit experiment. The double slit experiment was the first time, I think, the understanding came in about the observer effect. What happens in the double slit experiment when the observer observes how the wave collapses into a particle. And mind you, you can't cheat that observation. You can't cheat it by creating other methods of observation. Nay, you can't. The double slit experiment tells us that we cannot. When there is an observer, the wave collapses and the particle form of it, when the observer is taken away, gets back to the wave form. Okay. Interesting. Think about it. If there is a huge jungle somewhere, huge jungle, a massive tree comes down, it crashes, falls, a lot of noise, a lot of light, noise, it crashes. But there's nobody observing it. There is no observer. There is no observer effect. Is there a sound? Is there a light? Think of what quantum mechanics is saying. To the extent Einstein was so intrigued, he said, does this mean that the moon does not exist if I didn't see it? A great man like Einstein said that, and trying to understand the whole quantum mechanics principle. So what science is saying is, if left to themselves, things would be waves until somebody observed it. Well, and everything becomes solid and physical when the wave collapses. But what is Maya saying? Isn't it saying pretty much the same? At least that's what I feel. I see a lot of similarity in this topic, in what Maya is saying, what spirituality is saying about Maya, if not Maya is saying, what spirituality is saying. It is pretty much the same. That there is something, an illusion that is getting created, and that is infinite, that happens. So pretty much the similar lines what quantum mechanics is saying. So I'm getting to the last slide, but last slide in two. If you're liking what you're hearing, I'm planning to be sending a topic, talking a little more on different other topics, which I call as the building blocks of spirituality. Like we started with Maya, I'll talk about what is God, who is an avatar, a Sadguru, what is consciousness, what is the evolution of consciousness, various building blocks for spirituality. Pretty much, as I said, from the books that I have read of Meher Baba. So if you like what you're hearing, hit the subscribe button. You will get intimation when I post anything new. Also, give your thoughts, comments. Would love to hear that. Getting back to this. So basically, science is saying we're collapsing the wave and creating the physicality. Intriguing. If I'm sitting here and I'm collapsing the wave and I'm creating the physicality of the laptop, the desk, the table, the chair, you're sitting next to me. You're collapsing the wave. You're creating the physicality. Are you and I creating two different universes, two different physicalities? Are we both in the same universe? Are you seeing what I'm seeing? Am I seeing what you're seeing? Important and excellent thoughts and questions. And perhaps the concept of consciousness comes in, which is a topic for another day. I just wanted to highlight that point. So just as science is saying this, spirituality is saying God alone is real, all else is illusion. So I think there is a big intersection between these two on what Maya is, what is the principle of Maya, and the science is getting closer to spirituality here. So good. So some of the thoughts to think about. So where is this Maya getting created? If I am creating the Maya, if I'm collapsing the wave in the universe and I'm creating it in the Maya, where is it creating? Am I creating it in my physical body? Is it in my brain? Is it in my mind? Is it in my consciousness? How is it? How is it getting dissolved? Maybe I will do a deeper aspects of Maya at some other point, but this is something for us to think about. I would think about this and see if some thoughts come out about that. Everything that I have talked today essentially is from these two books that you see here. One is one is Discourses, and the other is the Everything and the Nothing. Both these books have been written by Meher Baba, and my study of that, and for my understanding, and with my understanding, I put up this small presentation. And as we get to it, thank you very much. I thank you very much for your time, and look forward to your thoughts and comments. Thanks a lot, and Jai Meher Baba and Jai Gurudev.